I'm Nick, and inside this box is one of the most interesting Mini ITX boards for home labbers that I've seen in a long time. This is called the Miniroute N7, and ladies and gents, it's got a Ryzen 8845HS on board. That's right, a mobile CPU. The reason why this is interesting is not because of the CPU, but what's on the board. The Miniroute N7 comes in a few different configurations. Mainly, the deal is it has the same CPU for all of the available configurations from their store. So this one, as mentioned already, has the AMD Ryzen 7 Pro 8845HS. There's a version, which is the one that we have here, that has this included Johnsbow cooler, and that version will go for $509 US, and the version without the cooler is $489 US. There's also no RAM and no SSD option, and obviously no power supply option, as you're quite literally just buying a motherboard. I would suggest probably buying it with the cooler if you don't want to go and find a compatible cooler, but the situation with this is it is compatible with basically all Intel coolers, so compatibility should be quite ubiquitous for most Intel-based coolers. Keep in mind though, I'm not sure if the IHS is included if you decide to purchase a cooler separately. I'd probably guess that the IHS is included with the board. From what you can see already, the price for what you're getting is not terrible. I mean, we're going to talk about all the features in a moment, but you can get an idea of what that is before we get further into the video. It is an impressive piece of kit. Typically for a product like this, I wouldn't do an unboxing like this, but I just wanted to show you what it comes with because it is kind of interesting because it comes in a couple different configurations. But first of all, we have some foam. Yay, get rid of that. We have an IO shield, which you're definitely going to need for this. And look at that, you can already see dual 10 gig Ethernet. What's going on there? We'll show you in a sec. As well as two SATA, that's right, 8643 SAS connectors. Yep, that's right. There's some really funky stuff going on with this board. And finally, the board itself, which is very, very interesting. Well, there's actually more. There's a little tool to remove the cooler, but this is just a regular Johnsbow Intel cooler on an AMD board. Now, this may confuse some of you. The story goes, most of the time when it comes to saving space on small form factor boards, especially when it's kind of these Frankenstein kind of products, will always have Intel mounting because there's just lots of coolers out there. And again, they save space on the PCB for having any type of exotic mounting setup. But this Johnsbow cooler needs to go because I want to show you the most interesting parts of this board, and it's hiding under the cooler. But first, you need to see what I'm doing. So let's change that. That's better. Comes with this little tool to remove the cooler. However, this board does come in a couple configurations where it won't include a cooler or RAM or storage. The cooler comes off in two sections because it's not exactly what you're expecting. And the keynote out there would have already seen what's going on here. These have springs in them, so if you're trying to do something exotic like this, make sure you don't lose the springs. The whole thing will come off now in one go. There we go. Alrighty. As you can see, we have a mobile processor. Yeah, I'll be reapplying all the thermal paste here. I would never reuse thermal paste, but let's clean it up. It's going to take a little bit of work. The CPU is the AMD Ryzen 7 Pro 8845HS. It's an 8-core, 16-threaded APU. It does have the 780M integrated with it as well. There's also some stuff you'll find on a regular desktop motherboard, considering this is a desktop motherboard with a mobile CPU. We have an EPS power connector, we've got our USB 3.0 front panel connector, USB 2.0 header, two PWM fan headers, a front panel USB-C header, there's a USB 2.0 Type A port. This is typically used for booting hypervisors or for some other diagnostic equipment. I would not boot your operating system off this. There's some operating systems that it's okay, but yeah, most I wouldn't, because the flash memory in USB sticks is absolute garbage. There's also the front panel connector for the lights and all the switches. You've got your 24-pin power connector. There's the TPM header. There's two 8643 headers on the board too. This is for SATA-based storage. There's also these little LEDs on the surface of the board, which shows you how many drives are connected to this controller. You also have a postcode LED array. You've got a power light, you've got boot, DRAM, and VGA, just to let you know that that's what's happening here. There's also a by 16 sized PCIe slot. However, this is only a PCIe by 8 Gen 4 slot. So the reason why this is a full by 16 size slot is for compatibility more than anything else here. There's one M.2 slot on this side, and then the fun stuff starts to happen on the back of the board, because you're probably asking, Nick, where is the memory? Well, you've already seen where it is on previous parts of these clips, but there's two DDR5 SODIMM slots on the back side of the board, as well as another M.2 slot. Both M.2 slots on this board are PCIe Gen 4 by 4 slots. So you're getting the full bandwidth, but the fun stuff doesn't just stop there, because for rear I/O, there's a USB 4 port, which is a 40 gigabit USB 4 port, which means technically, after we do some testing, you can connect this with Thunderbolt devices. So external GPUs, you could do it. USB Type A, we've got HDMI 2.1, we've got DisplayPort 1.4, two USB Type A ports, and the greatest thing about this board, other than this regular old 3.5mm audio jack, is dual Marvell 10 gigabit Ethernet via two RJ45 ports. That is awesome. I've got to say, when companies like Miniroute reach out with really interesting boards like this, asking if it's something that we want to look at, it's always an instant yes from me, because this right here is a combination of two really cool things. First of all, that dual 10 gigabit Ethernet is just completely next level on something of this form factor. A mobile CPU, which typically uses almost no power whatsoever. This is looking like it's going to be a very compelling motherboard to use for your own storage server. The thing that makes this more compelling than most other boards on the market isn't just that 10 gig Ethernet, it's the fact that you have these dual 8643 SAS connectors, meaning for 8 drive backplanes, this will connect right up. Well, I guess the next thing is we fire it up and see what the deal is with this, if I'm being honest, pretty quirky motherboard. But before that, we're going to have to populate it with some memory. To be honest, I can't remember how big this memory is. Could be 64 gig, could be 32 gig. I'm guessing it's a 32 gig kit. I don't know. Could be 16 gig, I don't know. Maybe it is 16 gig, I don't know. But we'll find out in a minute. Not that it's important, because I'm probably gonna be putting 64 gigs of memory on this. I'm so excited! I've got to put it back together. I've been poking around the BIOS a little bit, and I found some very interesting things in the N7's BIOS. As we go into some advanced settings, you will see that we have some interesting options in terms of power. When we check out the system configuration, there's a drop down that allows us to set the power for the system. If you're not aware, the 8845 will allow you to pull 54 watts of power at full tilt if you really wanted to. Now, why this is important is because if you're thinking of using this for content creation or to have a PC that has higher performance for gaming with the APU, then setting 54 watts, especially on a system that is not a mini PC where you're not going to have any thermal constraints, or if you're building something that you want to have as kind of a middle ground for productivity, 54 watts can be quite useful. But if you're using this in your home lab and you're wanting to use this for a storage server, 15 watts can cut the cheese quite easily. So you do have a quick way of setting that in the configuration. You can change the TJ Max so it brings down the thermal limit for the CPU as well. You then also have eco mode, which allows you to set it to 35 watts flat out. So there is actually quite a bit of control here. You've also got some fan control, which allow you to set up all of the different PWM limits. You can tell it not to be PWM. So to be honest, there's quite a lot more control here than I thought there would be for a motherboard like this. But as it goes, when you find these kind of Frankenstein motherboards, they don't really limit any of the features that are available for a platform. It's nice to see that everything here is enabled. Like legitimately, you can do everything here. There's also some PCIe configuration stuff, which is interesting. You can set up your 4G decoding. You can enable resizable bar, which we're just going to flick on really quickly. There's also Pixie booting here. So if you wanted to boot over the network, you can enable that. We're going to disable that. There's also some NVMe configuration stuff, but there is something else that I found that was interesting. It was the OEM features management will allow you to change the by 16 sized PCIe slot, which we mentioned is a by 8 slot, and enable bifurcation. So if you have a PCIe card that essentially has two M.2 drives on it, you can split it down the middle, doing by 4x4. I'm going to set this to by 8 because I don't need it to be by 4x4 at this point in time. As mentioned, because this board has dual 8643 adapters, it does need some storage controllers. So it's got two ASMedia AHCI controllers, which have 6 ports per controller, which is pretty standard here. Other than that, the memory that we installed was just 16 gigs of RAM. Nothing too exciting going on here. And overall, it's a pretty normal looking BIOS in terms of what it supports and what features it will allow you to configure. I had an M.2 with Windows 11 installed and I just popped it in so we could have a bit of a poke around to see what the deal was with the specs here. So again, the Ryzen 7 Pro 8845HS with Radeon 780M graphics. This machine is currently running at 54 watts, so the maximum power draw, just for a little bit of testing, which I'll show in a moment, as well as only 16 gigs of RAM because that's what I had laying around. Also Ethernet, we've got our 10 gig adapter. There are two 10 gig adapters as mentioned, they're both here. And you'll see that I am connected at 10 gigabit because all of the network here at GearSeekers is 10 gig. We don't have anything slower than that on our network. Also, because this has a USB 4 port, and if you're wondering if USB 4 networking works to a Thunderbolt NAS, it does work. We only have a 20 gig connection because that's the limitation of the NAS that I'm connecting to, but technically we should be able to get a full 40 gigabit if the device on the other side supports it, right? And provided you have the right cable. I do have the right cable, but as mentioned, the NAS that I'm connecting to only has 20 gig Thunderbolt. So yeah, it does work. It works quite well, actually. In fact, let's do a little bit of a test to show you how fast it is. We'll change this to NVMe SSD because this is an SSD NAS, and we'll let her rip and we'll just show you how fast this goes. We're getting very, very fast speeds here. About, 1700 megs a second. It'd probably go faster if the NAS wasn't so full, but it is what it is. It's very quick. The NAS that it's connecting to is a QNAP 5-bay NAS. We've actually covered it. I'll put a link in the description down below if you want to see. It's running QNAP's QUTS Hero with ZFS support, so it is actually quite a fast device. In fact, it's the device that I currently use to edit all of our videos off, but it will be replaced with this motherboard and a much more serious setup. As you can see here, the performance over this USB 4 network is very impressive. I gotta say, this Miniroute N7 is looking very, very spicy and very, very cool. One of the things that I found really interesting about this board in particular was getting USB 4 networking was quite easy to get up and running. It can be tricky and some Thunderbolt devices won't play nicely, but the rule of thumb is typically with USB 4, anything that is Thunderbolt 3 and up should work without a problem. And that was my experience. I had a Thunderbolt 4 NAS. Well, I have a Thunderbolt 4 NAS that I use, and this connected to it without a problem. You saw what the limiting factor was, and that was Thunderbolt itself. 20 gigabits though, very, very cool. when this is built and up and running, we're gonna absolutely send it with full 40 gigabit Thunderbolt 4 from my editing PC. Oh, sorry, USB 4. Yeah, because they're so different, right? I mean, they're just calling it USB 4 because it's ubiquitous across all the platforms, not just on Intel. Here's what's really funny though. Maybe you guys don't know this, but there's USB 4 2.0. Come on, just like call it USB 5 or something. Why is it USB 4 2.0? What a weird, man, they just really can't get names right with standards in general. Hey, look at my USB 4 2.0 drive. It's so dumb.
That's confusing.
It's like USB 3.2 Gen 1, Gen 2, USB 3.1 Gen 2. It's like just, you know what they should do, honestly? They should just say, hey, this is USB 5 gigabit. This is USB 10 gigabit. Let's just call it that. I mean, well, Rob and I call it that when we talk about it, because then we know exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about USB standards. We're like, oh yeah, it's got 10 gigabit USB ports.
Do you talk about USB standards that much?
Yeah. I was talking to with RobTech and Jared's Tech the other day about USB standards and the stupid naming, and man, there's a secret group chat.
It's not really something that comes up a lot in my friend group.
Well, it does with my friend groups. We talk about all of these weird things all the time. So what happens when you're a nerd, Claire? Oh. You talk to your friends about USB naming standards and how ridiculous they are. Yep. I mean, there's also lots of other stuff that we talk about. No, that word's not appearing on the channel. I've actually censored it. So no one knows what that word is now.
What about other?
Oh, Claire, we're not using that word on the channel. We've talked about this. We can't say the L word in public.
I didn't.
Now people are going to want to know what the L word is. And I will heart the one that I know is the truth. Don't say it again. It's not offensive. It's just, I don't like what it stands for. It starts with L. That sounds really bad. That's not, no. It's not what you think it is. It's just something very normal. I will mouth it out now for you, right? But I'm not going to say the word. I hate the word. It just, I hear it and it just makes me angry because...
I'm actually not interested in...
Stop saying the L word. I wouldn't usually do this, but I was curious to see what the performance was like if I had a little bit of a play around with this thing in Cyberpunk. I've set the settings to the Steam Deck preset. I've then set FSR 3 with the performance preset. And you can see there's an FPS counter in the top left. Now, it's not the best FPS that you're going to see in any game, but this is more than playable for a game like Cyberpunk. I think this is running quite well. This is also at 1080p. This is more than playable for a game like this. Couple stutters here and there, but overall, for a motherboard that is really designed to be for a NAS, this is playing quite well. I'm also playing this through a capture card too, so there is that. Let's decapitate him. Maybe not. You'll notice a bit of tearing. That's actually more to do with the capture card than it is with the experience for the game. So yeah, just yeah, I'm sorry about that. It's just, it is how it is. You know what we call Miniroute in Australia, right? A quickie. Some Aussies bound to get that joke. Just a small one. Speaking of Miniroutes, I guess you are wondering what is next for the N7. You're looking at it. This is a half 3D printed 2U server enclosure that I designed, that I covered in a bit of a little 3D printing adventure a few weeks ago. And this was the motherboard that I was referring to, that I wanted to put in it to make this the coolest SSD NAS ever, because that's what this is going to be doing, all of the SSD NASing shenanigans. So make sure you subscribe to see that one. That's coming very, very soon. Just waiting for the drives to arrive. Once we get drives, it's on like... Right? Yeah, you said it. This board with this CPU, with this feature set, honestly, it could not be more perfect for a NAS. This thing is really freaking cool. Dual 8643 connectors. You've got a PCIe by 16 slot that you can use by 4x4 with bifurcation. Dual 10 gigabit Ethernet, a mobile CPU which you can drop to pulling as little as 15 watts of power on an air cooler for a small enclosure. That, for me, ladies and gents, is kind of a match made in heaven. From the little bit of testing that you saw me do with this, it kind of lives up to what I thought it was capable of. Gaming, sure, if you wanted to play Cyberpunk at 40 FPS at 1080p low or the 1080p Steam Deck preset, it's fine. Like if you really wanted to do that. If you wanted to whack in a GPU that was PCIe by 8, which there's lots of GPUs that are actually like that out on the market, I think this would be very, very compelling. If you wanted to build a NAS and have it as a low-powered NAS, very compelling, dual 10 gigabit Ethernet. Overall, I think this is just a really freaking cool combination of features. The Miniroute N7, well, for me at least, is a home labber's dream come true. What a cool little board. There's so much more you can do with this as well. But for my use case and what we're going to be doing when we revisit this board shortly is this thing is just going to do exactly what I want it to do. I'm absolutely psyched on the next phase with this thing. So make sure you subscribed and all that jazz. Guys, I haven't been excited about a board for a long time. This is the stuff that I love. This is why mini PCs are the future, because with motherboards like this really being designed for small form factor PCs with everything on the board, you don't really need more than that for your home lab. You just don't. And if you're not using it for your home lab and you want to do something serious with it, I'm pretty sure the Miniroute N7 will hold up to the task. Let us know your thoughts down below. Better get out and get this quickie installed.